Paul, delighted to have you here with us. I'm sorry you're no longer chairman of the Scotch Whisky Association, but Paul is going to be talking to us about the recipe for leadership and innovation. Paul, thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that kind introduction. As you can probably gather, most of my career has been in consumer products, so I tend to come at innovation from that perspective. Also, even though I was CEO of Diageo for 14 years, I was actually in the company for 32 years, so I may be a little myopic in how I look at business. I thought I'd start by taking you down memory lane. Join me in a little trip. When I was about 9, 10 years of age in the north of England, I would rush home from school and I'd turn on our black and white TV, and you had to give it a few minutes to warm up, and I would sit in front of it and watch a program called The Jetsons. Now, a show of hands, who remembers The Jetsons? Thank goodness. I thought I may be the only dinosaur that actually recalled them. But let's look at what they had. They had Skype. They had a hoverboard. They had an interactive watch. And they had a robotic maid who could go around, serve your tea, and vacuum as she went around. What's not on this slide is the fact that the father, he also had a car that would sprout wings. And of course, one is being developed now in California. Apparently, there is a US company out of Silicon Valley that will start offering humanoids for sale at the price of $30,000 early next year. You've probably seen how you can now get robotic vacuum cleaners. You can now get robotic lawnmowers. So all of this that seemed quite fanciful, I'm 63, so this is 54 years ago, has actually come to pass. But that isn't the real point here. When I, as two very influential people in my life, pointed out, my father and my teacher, when they said that I was becoming a bit obsessed with this particular program, one of them, who'd clearly been born in the late 30s, had grown up through the war, and then became a teacher, and unfortunately had me as his pupil, he said to me, he said, "This is all fine, Paul. I know you keep writing essays about it, and you know that's all you want to talk about." He said, "But none of those things will happen because we don't need them." And that was a culture that he grew up with that was very much oriented towards need. My father, who was quite worried by this, he made what I thought in later life was quite profound by saying, "It's fine to have your head in the clouds, but please keep your feet on the ground." That, you know, you can imagine things, but let's not get too far ahead of things. Now, as I've spent a lot of my career in new product development, new market development, et cetera, these are two dynamics that have stayed with me as a challenge. When you innovate, are you innovating for the need as you see it today, or are you trying to create something because you have confidence that with brilliant marketing, you can actually drag that consumer towards what you have created that they may presently be unaware of? And striking the balance on that continuum, I think, is a critical challenge. Regarding imagination, you know, we all want to release the imaginative powers of our employees, but at what point in time are they going too far? And clearly, there are commercial dynamics that have to be brought into consideration. So that was then. That was the Jetsons. Let's look at what we're now facing. These are just some things that I picked out of the air. You know, we've got artificial intelligence. We've got 3D printing, which I actually think as a banner does a great disservice to what's actually happening in that space. If you look at the materials that are now being used to do small production runs, it's quite incredible. cell patterning, and here I get way out of my depth, but how cells can be developed to attack certain diseases within the body and then injected in. It's quite incredible. Robotics, we talked about the robotic vacuum cleaner, we talked about the robotic lawnmower. Compass, which employs 500,000 people, the largest food supplier in the world to business. We've actually, and it's had some press, and people speak very amusingly about it, we have now developed the burger flipper. This is a robot that basically goes in front of the griddle and flips burgers. Now, you get a far more uniform burger. It actually has a very powerful impact on labor cost, like it eliminates it. And also, it totally eliminates one of the most dangerous jobs in the kitchen. So, you know, robotics are beginning to take over. But what else is out there that we don't know about? But again, my contention is always, in any business, what are those trends that you believe are important to your business? What are the trends that you are going to champion, that you're going to back, that you're going to put resource behind? And secondly, how do you mesh those trends with your own capabilities to try and ascertain what the commercial prize is? And how do you balance investment today with the payoff tomorrow? And what I always say to people that I work with is, whatever it is, you've got to have a point of view on this stuff. You can't just sit and let it happen around you. You have to have a point of view, and you have to communicate that point of view to your employees, and you have to make sure that if you believe in something, you are visibly putting resource behind that particular activity. Otherwise, I think it can become quite facile. So, what I would say, if companies are not prepared to read, embrace, and champion certain trends, then they are leaving themselves incredibly vulnerable to becoming totally obsolete. So what are the social implications of all this? And I'll give you a vignette. I have a home in the States, but I also have a home in Sussex. I have a very fine gardener who's been with me for many, many years. And we had one of these robotic lawnmowers demonstrated for us. Now, what was clearly on his mind is, okay, you get this lawnmower, what's going to happen to me? So I was able to say, Mick, do not worry about it. You've been with me 20 years. We will play this out until you're ready for retirement. We're not going to change your pay or anything. But it was weighing heavily on his mind until I actually offered him those assurances. So, as all of your employees see all this automation taking place, all this onslaught of technology, you know, that has got to be weighing very heavily on their mind. If I was sitting as a 25-year-old auditor, I don't think there are many 25-year-old auditors in this group, big data and artificial intelligence would really be on my mind. You know, what is that going to do to the audit profession? I'm not picking on auditors. I'm just saying that the implications around work is incredibly profound. And I don't believe business, and I certainly don't believe that government has got their minds around just how far-reaching these implications are. Now, some would say, don't worry. Remember the Industrial Revolution. We, for want of a better term, automated, and we found jobs for the displaced workers. Well, we did. What I would say is that the Industrial Revolution, if you actually analyze it, spanned over 100 years. You know, from the first change, being in the cotton mills, through to steam, through to many other things. It was quite a long process. Also, we didn't have life expectancy as long as it is. We didn't have lifetime in jobs expectations where they are now. And we had a system whereby average people felt that they would be looked after by their employees. So Some people still say, don't worry about the Industrial Revolution. I'm more towards the camp of we should worry and we should debate, because this is a tsunami that is coming at us that business, communication experts, governments better have a perspective on. Because I think we run the risk, given the sheer speed of technological advancement, that we will see a whole generation economically stranded because of this onslaught. And I see it happening in sort of middle management ranks. I can see people moving up to manage the robots, to design the robots, but I also think you're going to find people who will move down, who will struggle to hold on to that middle tier pay and so on. So I think it is a huge issue. I do think that little is talked about in innovation programs around exactly what those implications are going to be. And I hope that both business and government will start to embrace this more. Because if we don't, I think the consequences are quite dire. We already, I believe, in this country and in other developed nations have a whole raft of individuals who've kind of economically, socially been left behind. And I see that accelerating unless we really embrace the consequences of this very powerful technological future that we stand not on the edge of, but right in the middle of. I will stop there and take any questions you may have.
Paul, as chair, perhaps I can have the advantage of the first question and open up while you consider your questions for Paul ahead. Paul, among all the different things you've done in your career, and I could have given you a very big introduction when you joined, I particularly pulled out your role in the UK Department of, I keep on getting it wrong now, but industry and skills and so on, and where that's going. What I'm interested in, where we just left off, is where do you see training? Where do you see corporate responsibility around training and new development?
Well, I think first of all, we have seen some progress, but I don't think the school system is giving business what it needs. I think there has been a massive widening of the curriculum, and too often 16 to 18-year-olds are not skilled in the basics. And I don't mean my old skills of what they used to say, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but even the basics of computer understanding, even the basics of how to comport yourself in a business environment. And business is going to have to do more of that because, although it's improving, I don't think we have the raw material that we need going forward. I'm quite frustrated with government. I have to say that my involvement sort of finished when the government or the leadership changed. I was particularly involved when David Cameron was the PM. And I think since then, business has lost its voice to a certain extent, maybe because it wanted to lose its voice, I don't know. But I don't sense that there is the dialogue between business and government that there was.
To the floor. Charles. Yeah, sorry, we've got one, sorry. Down there to begin with, sorry.
Peter Morgan. Paul, I was very interested in what you were saying about the workforce being left behind by the speed of change. I wonder how much you think there is now a tension between senior management and the staff. I'm thinking of the last two companies I worked for, Rolls-Royce and BT, both companies facing very rapid technological change, in which there seems to me to be an appetite for change amongst the top 500 people and a great deal of terror amongst the thousands beneath those. I wonder if you recognise that as a tension And I wonder if you've got some thoughts on how managements and communicators might approach that tension.
I think it is a huge tension. I think in business, and I hope this was something that was recognized that I tried to drive in my old firm, Diageo, we couldn't promise people a job for life. But what I hope we could offer them was a set of competencies and skills that would serve them well in their life. So maybe their career, unlike mine, wouldn't stay with one company, but they would leave our company very well equipped to prosper in other environments, other sectors, or whatever. And that was very important to me. However, I think a lot of companies don't communicate that sufficiently, and maybe don't embrace that need to equip our employees with those skills as they should. But I think it is a huge communication issue. I think in many, many companies there is a level of fear that I don't remember experiencing as I came through the various ranks.
There was a question up here, and then we'll go into the back after that.
I should say all your
Monica?
companies are fine. It's the ones that are not here that's the problem.
It's Charles. And then we'll go.
Hi, I'm Charles Naylor. I was most recently the CBI, previously at HSBC, and before that Credit Suisse and various other companies. Share your frustration completely about the skills issue here in the UK, and particularly having been 2 years at the CBI, seeing it firsthand, very frustrated. I suppose my question is, you've run international businesses. Is there any country where you see that they're actually getting this right?
Singapore.
And do you think we can learn something? Do you think we can actually
we
implement some
have
of the
to.
stuff?
I think we have to. I mean, it's very interesting. One example is that I think if you get a degree or an MBA in Singapore, you're obliged to work at what is a pretty modest salary for the Singaporean government. You know, that is part of the contract. And then, having worked 2 years or 3 years, and I think it is contractual, you then can spread your wings and move into the private sector. But actually, I also think in Asia there is a far more profound desire by parents to have, at all levels in society, to have their children educated better than they were, which certainly was my case. You know, my mother worked in a cotton mill, my father worked in a factory. But, you know, the worst time of my life is if I came home with a poor school report. And I don't sense that. And I don't know what we do about it, but I think it is a time bomb that's ticking. I don't wish to be dismal before we break for coffee, but I do think it's a real issue. And the hope that I would have is that once we get all this Brexit stuff out of the way, issues like this can start to get real debate. Because at the moment, everything is preoccupied, understandably and necessarily, with the whole Brexit issue.
There is a question at the back of the room.
Thank you. John Smythe from Engage for Change. You mentioned the diversity word a little earlier, and I wondered about the gender diversity in your 500,000 strong population, particularly at senior levels, and indeed your outlook and approach to that topic.
Well, I'm reticent to talk about it, given Ian Davis's comment that it's a dangerous word. But look, you've got two aspects here. You've got the fact that when you employ 500,000 employees, you are diverse. We operate in many different cultures, different countries, and therefore we have to tap into a broad array of employees. To grow our business as we wish to grow it this year, we will have to recruit another 50,000 people. So we have to have, again, he said culture was a dangerous word, we have to have a culture that is inclusive, a culture that unites. And I agree that in different markets, in different sectors even, you know, we serve the military, we serve senior living, we serve hospitals, we serve schools. And there are mini cultures in that, but you have to have a culture that is the glue within the organization that makes all those pieces come together. And therefore, for us, we have a simple, it's not forgotten against sin. We have to be diverse because otherwise we won't serve our clients.
Jackie, again at the back.
Paul, thank you. It's Jackie Elliott, Cathcart Consulting. Are we trying to push your vision, this new world, into a very old and broken model? Because it seems to me that, well, I have a personal interest in this, of course. I grew up, I had a childhood, I had a chunk of education.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Is the mic working?
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm talking about the existing model that we all live with, as opposed to the vision, the picture that you've just painted. And I'm thinking about the 3 stages of life that we have at the moment. We have a bit of childhood, we have a chunk of education, a bit more in some countries than others, and then we go straight into work. And a very few years ago, we retired at 60 and we're supposed to be dead at 70. And that is absolutely gone out of the window, I'm very pleased to say.
Me too.
So I wonder whether you think we should look deeper at changing those stages. More education, so staying in education in every country, at least until 30. A bigger understanding of what life could be like post-65, because there is 30-odd years to come after that stage, and whether in business we are thinking about those issues and what more we should be doing.
Yeah, I don't know about the economic consequences of that, nor do I know or believe that you could force people into full-time education up to the age of 30. What I do believe is that we need to embrace that education is continuous. I don't care what level you are in the organization, you are always learning, and unfortunately, there isn't enough structure around that. The other thing is, the notion that you will stop work at 60 or 65 or even 70 has got to change, because the economic model will not sustain that. Your own personal economic model will not sustain that. I look at, I was brought up in an era whereby I would inherit whatever wealth resided in my parents' property. Well, that's not going to happen, because all that will get chewed up, and more besides, with senior living costs. You then look, I was fortunate, in fact, it's quite poignant given this past weekend, I believe I was in the golden generation. I didn't have to fight for my country. I got a free education. I left university, and it's what you want to do. I could get on the property ladder, and then I got a defined benefit pension plan. I look at my son, he's really going to have to start putting money away now for when he's 70, and unfortunately he isn't. So, he's going to have to, and many others, resign themselves to the fact that they're going to be working a long, long time. And therefore, another consequence of that, you better be happy in what you do, and you better be constantly learning new skills to make sure that whatever you have to offer, you can offer to the best of your ability.
One last question. Anyone in the room? No? Oh, okay, one last question, and then we'll go for a break.
Thank you, Di Burton from the North. Very nice to hear you. There's a lot of talk around we need to make communication more human. If you were to advise leaders on one behavioral trait that is going to make them more human, what would it be?
I think it has to be authenticity. I think it has to be, you don't always have, just because you have the CEO badge, you don't have all the answers. I think the biggest skill of a CEO is populating not only his immediate team, but the broader team with skills that can advise and influence, because ultimately the CEO does make the final call. But you need people around you who can really engage around the key issues. And you can only do that if you have a level of trust, and I believe what underpins trust is everybody being very authentic about what they're bringing to the table, good and bad.
Well, I think we've ended on a happier note. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for getting us there. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause.